This video is for the Keystone Biology Review Anchor 8, Ecology. These anchors focus on ecological levels of organization and the interactions and relationships in ecosystems. Here is an example of the levels of organization. Starting with the smallest unit, atoms, to make molecules. Molecules combine to form organelles. Organelles make up cells. Cells make up tissues. Tissues make up organs like your heart and lungs. Organs like your heart and lungs make your cardiovascular and respiratory system. Systems make an organism. Organisms make a population. Populations make communities. Communities to ecosystems. And then you can add in there biomes, and then finally the biosphere. Understanding those levels of organization is one thing. Applying them is another. Bacteria are in fact organisms. So all of those similar bacteria in Joey's throat make up a population. So this is a population of bacteria in Joey's throat. The animals in this pond means that there's more than one kind of animal. There's frogs, there's turtles, there's fish. That makes it a community. To have an ecosystem, you need to include both living and non-living factors. Biotic factors are living things that influence the ecosystem, whereas abiotic factors are non-living things that influence the ecosystem. See if you can pause the video and sort these examples into biotic and abiotic factors. Hopefully you came up with a list that looks something like this. Another major concept with ecology are cycles, the way things cycle through nature, including the water cycle and carbon cycle. Take a look at this diagram and see if you can label these parts of the water cycle. Hopefully you came up with something that looks like this. The carbon cycle is tracing how carbon moves through an ecosystem. Now, this is going to relate to things like cellular respiration and decomposition and the roles that a variety of organisms play, like decomposers or autotrophs, things that make their own food. It's also going to include things like photosynthesis, because you'll remember that carbon is significant, carbon dioxide especially is significant in the process of photosynthesis. In an ecosystem, there are interactions between predators, prey, autotrophs that make their own food, and heterotrophs that have to eat food. A food chain tells us or shows us that direct relationship from one trophic level to the next. In this case, grass would be a primary producer. The grasshopper would be a primary consumer because it's eating the grass. The small mammal would be a secondary consumer because it's eating the insect. And then at the top of the food chain would be a predator, like the owl. In a food web, we see that there's more than one thing that's eating the autotrophs, and there's more than one thing that might be eating the small mammals or the insects. So we construct this food web to show those relationships. Every now and then we get a species that's considered a keystone species. Removing that species causes the whole food web to collapse. Sometimes the relationships aren't predator-prey, autotroph, heterotroph. Sometimes the relationships describe a symbiosis, a life together. In the case where both organisms benefit, that's mutualism, where they both add something to the relationship. Where one benefits and the other is unaffected, that's commensalism. The final one, parasitism, is where one organism benefits, but the other organism is harmed. So here are some interactions that you need to be familiar with. Heterotrophs, they need to eat food. Autotrophs make their own food. Predator and prey, as the amount of predators rise, typically the amount of prey population fall. Herbivores eat only plants. Carnivores eat other living things. Scavengers eat dead things, and producers add energy to the ecosystem. In an ecosystem, the populations are changing. Sometimes we can describe that population growth as exponential. So long as there's plenty of food and resources and space, the population continues to grow. However, logistical growth shows us that at some point a population stops the exponential growth and reaches the carrying capacity. That is the largest number that the ecosystem can sustain. There's now not enough food, or there's only just enough living space, or only just enough water. So long as that population stays below the carrying capacity, the population can survive. If the population were to expand beyond the carrying capacity, then there would be a large die-off until the population could return to that carrying capacity number. This graphic is showing how there's a range of tolerance. That is, species thrive so long as they're in an ideal range of tolerance. In this case, species B is in that optimum range, whereas species A is too salty, it's too hot, it's too dry. Species C is too cold, it's too something. In this case, so long as the population is in an optimum ecosystem, and that ecosystem has optimum ranges, that population can expand to a much higher carrying capacity than if the conditions were less than optimal. Sometimes species compete. Now they're totally different species, but they're competing for the same basic thing. This is called competitive exclusion, where one of the two species is excluded. In this case, if you grow these two bacteria separately, they both do fine and they'll reach a similar carrying capacity. However, if they're put in a petri dish together, the blue bacteria will outcompete the orange bacteria. A habitat is the area that a species likes to live. So in this case, you can see all these warblers in a habitat of a coniferous forest. But a niche is the specific area that a species can occupy in the ecosystem. In other words, they're doing a specific job. In this case, the warblers are nesting in different locations so that they don't compete for nesting sites. This graphic is showing predator and prey cycles. As the population of rabbits increase, there's more food available for the predator, the foxes. As the fox population increases, they begin to eat more of the rabbits, and the rabbit population takes a nosedive. With no more food available, the foxes die off, and the rabbit population begins to increase again. This graphic shows that predator and prey relationship. This graphic is showing the role of producers, consumers, and decomposers. Producers photosynthesize. They make their energy from photosynthesis, from the sun. The primary consumer is going to be the animal that's eating that plant. But then other animals might eat that one. Secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, because we're going up the food chain. Decomposers are heterotrophs, but they're helping to break down organic material from something that was once living. I hope that helps you understand some of these relationships and the anchor number 8, ecology.